It all started with a tweet, but ended with a threat. On June 6th, the escalating feud between two of the most powerful men in America, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, took a dramatic turn when the president, visibly enraged by Musk's recent criticisms, issued what many interpreted as a political ultimatum: the possible cancellation of all government contracts with Musk's companies, including Tesla, SpaceX, and Starlink. In a statement delivered during a rally in Tampa, Trump called Musk's public stance on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and other conservative economic plans a total betrayal, adding, "Maybe it's time we stop giving handouts to billionaires who bite the hand that fed them." The crowd roared in agreement, but the implications were anything but casual. This wasn't just campaign rhetoric. It was a direct threat aimed at one of the most government-integrated private sector moguls in the country. And in true Trump fashion, it was made publicly, aggressively, and without filters. For context, the fallout began days earlier when Musk, in a now viral post on X, called Trump's latest fiscal proposal a disgusting abomination, warning it could inflate the national deficit by trillions. The internet exploded. Analysts weighed in. Political commentators chose sides. And Trump, a master of narrative control, couldn't let the moment pass. The feud wasn't new. Over the years, Trump and Musk had oscillated between awkward allies and passive-aggressive adversaries. Musk served briefly on Trump's business councils early in his presidency, but later distanced himself after controversial policy decisions. Trump, for his part, once praised Musk as a genius inventor, but more recently began labeling him as overrated and ungrateful. This latest economic jab from Musk, delivered with trademark bluntness, was the final straw. What makes this particular threat so explosive is the sheer financial weight behind it. Tesla has received billions in energy tax credits and sustainability grants from federal agencies. SpaceX, meanwhile, holds major contracts with NASA and the Department of Defense for satellite launches, cargo deliveries, and strategic aerospace infrastructure. Starlink is increasingly being considered for global communications under federal support. The idea of canceling these contracts doesn't just represent political retaliation, it potentially risks disrupting national defense operations, satellite programs, and future space exploration missions. And yet, Trump's tone suggested he was ready to pull that trigger. For Musk, the message was clear: challenge Trump publicly and face financial consequences. But as history has shown, Musk rarely backs down from a fight, especially when his autonomy or ideology is questioned. The tech mogul's defenders immediately began framing Trump's remarks as a blatant abuse of political power, an attempt to suppress dissent through economic intimidation. Meanwhile, supporters of the president hailed the move as long overdue, claiming that no business, no matter how successful, should receive taxpayer funds while undermining the very leadership that enabled their growth. The stage was now set for a confrontation that went beyond economics, beyond ego, into a fundamental battle over influence, accountability, and the future of power in America. Almost immediately, Trump's threat sent shockwaves through both political and business circles, igniting fierce debates over the appropriate limits of executive influence and the dangers of using government contracts as a political weapon. On one side, Trump's loyal base cheered the move, with conservative media outlets like Newsmax and The Daily Caller praising the president for taking a stand against tech elitism. Hashtags like #No More Musk Money and #Defund Tesla began trending across platforms aligned with MAGA culture. Republican lawmakers, especially those vying for Trump's approval, publicly supported the idea of reevaluating government contracts, suggesting that Musk had long benefited from federal favoritism. "You can't attack the country and still cash its checks," one congressman declared on live television. The message was crystal clear. Musk was being punished not for failure, but for disloyalty. Yet on the other side of the divide, outrage brewed. Critics called Trump's comments authoritarian and dangerous, arguing that weaponizing federal policy to silence dissent set a terrifying precedent. Legal scholars from Harvard and Yale released joint statements condemning the rhetoric, warning that using federal influence to retaliate against critics could constitute a First Amendment violation if enacted. Editorials in the New York Times and The Atlantic raised alarms about the politicization of national infrastructure, suggesting that stripping contracts from SpaceX or Starlink could jeopardize global communications and national defense readiness. The Pentagon remained silent, but insiders leaked that multiple officials were deeply concerned about the security implications of interrupting SpaceX launch schedules, especially as geopolitical tensions continue to rise with China and Russia. For Elon Musk, the pressure was intensifying. While he made no direct response to Trump's Tampa speech, his activity on X revealed plenty. He began retweeting old footage of Trump praising Tesla and SpaceX, reminding followers of the president's previous support. He also reposted articles detailing how SpaceX had saved NASA billions and allowed the US to end reliance on Russian launch vehicles. In a pinned post, he wrote, "Truth shouldn't cost you your contracts. It should earn you respect." It was a message not just to Trump, but to every politician watching from the sidelines. Musk was positioning himself not as a victim, but as a disruptor holding power accountable, someone willing to risk financial stability for what he saw as economic truth. Behind the scenes, executives at Tesla and SpaceX were reportedly alarmed. Emergency meetings were called, legal teams were assembled to prepare for any federal actions or sudden changes in procurement policy. Shareholders raised concerns during investor calls, worried that political retaliation could harm long-term revenue. At the same time, private citizens and employees voiced support for Musk, starting grassroots petitions and launching the Stand With Elon campaign, which quickly gained hundreds of thousands of signatures. As the nation watched, the stakes had clearly shifted. This was no longer about fiscal policy or even political ideology. It had become a referendum on the boundaries of presidential power, the role of private enterprise in public life, and whether one man's criticism could justify unraveling decades of technological progress, all because it bruised the ego of another. The reaction inside Musk's orbit was immediate and fiery. In an emergency all-hands meeting at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, Musk told employees, "We will survive anything they throw at us. We built this company from scratch. We don't owe anyone." Employees were told to prepare for rapid restructuring in case of funding freezes, and legal teams were tasked with reviewing every active government agreement. At the same time, Musk himself returned to X with a vengeance. He published a 5-part tweet thread titled "The Real Cost of Retaliation," highlighting not just the public benefits SpaceX had delivered, such as lowering launch costs by 70% and enabling satellite internet access in war zones, but also the billions in revenue generated for American suppliers and contractors. The message was clear. Canceling contracts with his companies wouldn't just hurt Musk, it would hurt thousands of workers and disrupt entire industries. And then came the leak. An anonymous insider from the Department of Defense provided journalists with a memo outlining the potential fallout if SpaceX contracts were paused. The document listed dozens of pending satellite deployments, including critical communications arrays for U.S. troops abroad. It warned of a 6-month capability gap and projected that replacing SpaceX with alternative vendors would cost the government $4.8 billion more over 2 years. The memo went viral within hours, dominating news cycles and putting Trump's threat under even harsher scrutiny. What had once been a political stunt now looked like a logistical disaster in the making. At that moment, the Trump-Musk showdown stopped being just a clash of egos. It became a test of how far political retaliation could go before it endangered national infrastructure. The climax wasn't just dramatic, it was potentially catastrophic. In the aftermath, the weight of political consequence began to press down on both sides. The leak from the Department of Defense had done what no tweet or rally could. It forced Washington to consider the real-world implications of Trump's threats. Overnight, think tanks, policy experts, and former military officials began speaking out, citing national security, technological disruption, and economic fallout as critical risks should SpaceX or Tesla lose their federal support. Trump's closest advisors reportedly urged him to cool the rhetoric, warning that continued escalation could alienate swing voters and centrist donors ahead of key primaries. But Trump, ever defiant, stood by his words, stating in a follow-up interview, "If a billionaire is going to call my policies a disaster, he shouldn't get to profit from my presidency." The base roared again, but this time so did Wall Street, and not in celebration. Elon Musk, for his part, chose silence as strategy. In the days following the leaked memo, he stopped posting about the feud entirely. Instead, his feeds filled with launch photos, product updates, and tech milestones. The message was subtle but pointed. While politics fumed, progress continued. Behind the scenes, however, his teams were working overtime. Lobbyists ramped up efforts to secure congressional backing. Legal counsels prepared contingency plans in case any of the rumored audits or contract reviews materialized. And investor relations specialists reached out to calm markets, assuring stakeholders that SpaceX and Tesla had the resilience to weather political volatility. The shift in tone was unmistakable. Less fire, more focus. As pressure mounted on Capitol Hill, the Trump administration in exile began to lose control of the narrative. The leaked defense memo was cited in multiple Senate hearings, and moderate Republicans started to break ranks. One even remarked, "There's a difference between holding companies accountable and sabotaging national interests out of spite." Several governors, both red and blue, issued statements praising SpaceX's contributions to state economies, warning against cutting off innovation for political points. Slowly, the narrative that had once painted Musk as an elite troublemaker began to reshape him into something far more complicated, a private citizen holding the line against political abuse. In the end, the Musk-Trump standoff wasn't about rockets or budgets, it was about boundaries. It reminded a watching world that influence doesn't make you immune, and that challenging power, even recklessly, can provoke consequences far beyond the intended target. But it also reminded us of something else. That in a time when noise dominates the news, silence, when timed right, can echo even louder.